The city holds its breath. You're standing at a window that used to be a life, lace-browned by years of smoke, a sill carved by elbows and time. Outside, Warsaw waits the way a held note waits for the next finger to move. August heat clinging to stone, tramlines shining like veins in the road. A red dusk stains the glass. The air tastes of brick dust and cabbage soup, of tin and the tired sweetness of ripe pears. Far off, a church bell practices silence, then gives up and rings once. Before we drift deeper, if these quiet corridors of history are where your mind likes to walk at night, you might subscribe, not out of habit, but to keep the lamp lit in this small room we share. And if you have a moment, tell us where you're listening from, or which image lingers for you. The match, the tram, the armbands red. Set the cup down. Let the city speak. You're listening to echoes of war. A single match flares. Not yours. Someone's across the courtyard. The light draws a face out of the evening, then lets it go. In the rooms below, spoons rest in bowls and are not lifted. In the stairwell, a bicycle leans against the wall, its chain whispering metal against paint. Breath gathers in pockets along the landings. Somewhere in this building, someone weeps without sound. Somewhere else, a woman threads a needle because hands must do something, and a man checks a watch that was his father's. They have waited so long that waiting has a smell, a rhythm. Today it breaks. The first word is not a word at all. It is a hiss in the radio wire, a shiver in the air that runs down to fingertips and makes them steady. Zrat. Turn. The next world will be constructed out of bodies and alleys, and the old city that refuses to die cleanly. You feel it before you know it. Air condensing, decisions hardening into their true names. A city is not a place. It is a promise crowded into streets. Warsaw is ready to collect on what it is owed. You step into the corridor. Footfalls multiply. A door opens, then another, like pages being turned in a room full of people who have read ahead. A boy, not a face, only the blur of a cap and the sinew of a wrist, rushes past carrying something wrapped in cloth. No one stops him. A kettle clicks off by itself. A cat slicks around an ankle and vanishes into a dust-smelling storeroom where potatoes used to be counted as if numbers could hold back winter. Outside, posters peel from walls, showing different histories underneath. A concert never played, a ration notice measured in hunger, a cartoon that has not been funny for years. The sky over the Vistula holds a suggestion of thunder that will not be weather. Pigeons lift and circle, then settle in the same place, as if the day must be arranged properly before it can end. Listen. The old city breathes. Listen again. The breath catches. At the corner of Świętokrzyska and Marszałkowska, a tram sits empty, doors open like a mouth surprised by its own quiet. One seat is cracked where a button once pressed too hard, nervous in a crowded noon, before noons were numbered by fear. An advertisement for soap greys into the metal. That small domestic lie, wash and be clean, feels almost kind compared to what is coming. You taste metal at the back of your throat. Iron. The idea of blood before blood arrives. The smell of oil from the stairwell where a hidden cache waits. Someone knocks once, twice, once again. The pattern everyone knows because everyone has met in cellars and kitchens, teaching each other the choreography of survival. In a courtyard, a wardrobe is dragged across cobbles to become a barricade. In an attic, a hole is cut through plaster so messages can run through walls like water finding its level. Then a shot. Then 2. Then 10. And suddenly it is August 1st, 1944, 1700 hours. W hour. The clock inside the city agrees with no other clock. Time becomes local, specific to streets, measured in runs between doorways and the distance between a thrown bottle and a German truck. Time becomes what people can carry in their hands. A boy ties a white and red armband with fingers that will never forget the knot. A girl wraps bandages, eyes learning how to stay open. A priest lifts bread and believes that if mercy exists anywhere, it must be smuggled like everything else. The match is still burning in the room across the courtyard. It is only a match. It is also the sun that Warsaw sets for itself. You breathe in brick dust, hot rope, gasoline. You breathe out a prayer without words. Chapter 1. W Hour. Fragments of a Beginning. 5 o'clock. Local to the heart. The city chooses its hour. You are on a stair that knows your step. The banister is worn where generations made their turns without looking. Today, hands slide quickly, not to fall, but to become fast. A house is a machine for remembering, where the squeak is on the third step, which neighbor coughs through winters, how light pools on the landing at exactly this time. Those facts become coordinates now. The stairwell becomes a map. A woman with flour on her wrist presses a parcel into your palm. Not bread. Metal wrapped in a kitchen towel that still smells of yeast. Her eyes make you promise something you cannot promise, and you promise anyway. In the courtyard, laundry strings become signals, a shirt pinned in the left corner meaning wait, 2 shirts meaning go. These are rules made of fabric and hope, and they will do. The air holds heat like a grudge. The sky is a pale lid over streets that suddenly look too narrow for what they must contain. Church bells are not supposed to ring now, but one does because time insists on being itself for a moment. A dog's bark breaks into bits against the walls. Then a burst of gunfire braids the sound together again, and the city realizes it has been speaking prose when the moment demands verse. A boy, again only movement, not a face, sprints by with a bottle clinking under his coat. Petrol. A rag. A recipe learned in the alphabet of necessity. At the gate, someone drags a desk across the cobbles and tips it onto its side. Barricade is a French word meaning, build a wall out of what you have to keep what you love. In Polish today, it means use wardrobes, bed frames, doors kicked off hinges, stones loosened with crowbars, sand from a playground no one used this year because joy was rationed. Over on Walla, the first flags appear, white and red trembling like lungs at the throat of a building. Down Krokowski Przedmieście, a sheet becomes a sign. A window opens and a hand raises a pistol, and then the pistol is part of the street's grammar. The shouting is not words you can separate. It is one large word that means, at last. And within that, a smaller word that means, careful. The Germans are caught standing. Not all of them. They are a machine, and machines do not sleep properly. But enough. A courier in boots too big runs past a surprised clerk who is reaching for a phone. A grey car idles where it was left by a driver who suddenly finds himself without a map that matches the ground. You feel the city tilt an inch as an empire loses its footing on a curb. Radio, paper, breath. The radio speaks in shavings and lint. You lean close, hearing the scuff of music under the static, then a voice that has learned to be thin so it can slip through walls. Orders repeat, not because people forget, but because repetition is faith. A small press in a basement breathes out sheets that will find hands in 20 minutes, and pockets in an hour, and truths in a day. Ink smears along the side of a man's hand. He reaches for a rag and leaves fingerprints on a crate that was once destined for butter. You read a line aloud without sound, the way people read on trams to prove to themselves that they can still be alone. The line promises more than it can keep, and exactly enough. We will hold. You fold the paper and slide it under your shirt as if it were a sacrament. Your body becomes archive. On the wall, a child's drawing. No faces, just a square with a roof and a rectangle that is probably a door, and beside it, a mark in pencil where someone measured a height last spring. The city records itself in centimeters and in ash. You run your hand across plaster that will soon be dust, and then will be mixed with water to patch a wound in a wall so words can keep running through. The city is good at recycling its own hurt. Outside, a German truck grinds a gear and is suddenly a target. The bottle flies. Time slows, thickening like syrup around the arc. The rag ignites before it lands. For a heartbeat, you see an image that will be a story. Fire wearing the shape of glass. A man's hand still in the release. A street holding itself together out of pride. Then time becomes speed again, and metal howls, and you are moving without remembering the moment between thinking and motion because there was no moment between those things. Your breath is loud. Your breath is louder than the truck. Your breath is louder than the history that will later make neat sentences out of this. Crosscut, a German signalman, a Warsaw nurse, the river. Somewhere closer to Alege Jerozolimsky, a German signalman whose name you'll never know hears the clatter in his line and cleans his fingernails with a knife his father gave him. He looks up at the ceiling and imagines it as sky. He thinks, storms. He thinks, soon. He is not cruel in this second. He is tired in the way men get tired when the day insists on inventing a new kind of work for their hands. He writes down the wrong time by mistake, and the mistake becomes part of the city's survival. A nurse in a makeshift post at a school that smells of chalk, and iodine ties a strip of linen around an arm that will keep its hand. She counts to 3 under her breath, not because that helps, but because numbers are a railing on a stair when the lights go out. She has learned to listen to pain the way a musician listens to a key change. The man on the table stares at the ceiling and names its cracks in his head as if they were streets. This one is Nowy Swiat. This one is Tamka. This one is the alley where I kissed someone and was not afraid. The nurse nods to herself when the bleeding slows. She is 22 years old and a century old and exactly today old. Down at the Vistula, water goes on doing the only thing it knows how to do: carry. The river holds the sky and sends it away, holds the city's face and refuses to keep it. Boats bump the banks softly, as if trying to remember a lullaby. On the Praga side, someone sculls with a shirt wrapped around an or to hide the shape. A heron lifts one leg, then the other. The river keeps its secrets badly and well. Barricade grammar. By late evening, Warsaw learns a new architecture. Streets become sentences made of nouns dragged out of apartments. Mattresses, armoires, sacks, bricks. Every object that once said home now says stop. Men and women work with the rhythm of people who finally have a use for their fear. They breathe in time with their hands. A door that once admitted guests lies on its side and declines empires. You help push a piano. Its keys clap like teeth as it bumps, and angle it into place behind a mound of sand. Someone laughs once, a real bright sound that breaks an hour too heavy to carry whole. A woman tucks a photograph into her pocket, then tucks the pocket deeper into herself. A man marks an arrow on a wall with chalk. Not art, but a map for a friend he does not know yet. Night licks at the edges of the streets, soft at first, then sure. Lanterns bloom in courtyards and hang like small moons with jobs to do. Shadows learn their assignments. A whistle means down. A double whistle means through. The city's language simplifies under fire. You are grateful for this. Complexity can wait for peacetime. Tonight, meaning must be quick enough to outrun bullets. Gunfire comes like weather now, arriving in bands. You can smell the difference between a burst aimed to frighten and a burst aimed to erase. Your stomach knows the difference before your mind does. You press your shoulder into the barricade and feel its truth. its roughness, its kindness. With splinters under your palm, and the splinter holds on, as if it knows you will need it to remember this exact square of world later, when words feel too clean. At midnight, someone pours tea. You cannot drink. The cup is hot against your fingers anyway, an ember you hold to believe in heat that is not destructive. A woman hums under her breath. The tune is not a tune you can name. It is the human act of remembering that songs exist even when no one can sing them whole. The match, somewhere across the courtyard, is long gone to ash. Yet the room inside you where it burned stays lit. You close your eyes. Brick dust. Metal. Breath. Silence. 4 anchors for a city about to learn how to float in fire. And when you open them, the horizon is already red. Chapter 2. Barricades become streets. The weight of wood. Morning has a burnt edge. You wake to hammering that has forgotten it's a sound and become a heartbeat. Somewhere a rooster crows because no one told it the rules have changed. You step outside into a courtyard already half-walled by furniture. Mattresses lean like weary giants, wardrobes belly down, cobblestones dark from last night's rain. Every object has been conscripted. Even silence works shifts now. A man measures angles with a carpenter's eye. The same hands once built staircases for wedding photos. He drives a nail through a door that used to keep cold out. Now it keeps everything else out. Children, unseen, but heard as the scrape of buckets, the shuffle of small boots, carry sand in pillowcases. A grandmother folds her shawl tighter and prays with the rhythm of the hammer. Faith is just repetition in another language. The air smells of sap and soot. Every blow releases the ghosts of the trees that once shaded picnics. You feel it in your bones. Warsaw is building not walls, but lungs. The rhythm of tasks. Someone counts. Not bodies, not bullets, just time. 2 strokes for each nail, 1 pause, 2 again. It's almost music. Across the street, a group of women squat around a washtub filled with gasoline and rags. They move with the precision of cooks. Fold, tie, soak, twist. A young man passes glass bottles down the line. He could be bottling cider if you close your eyes. When one slips and breaks, no one flinches. The shards are swept aside with the calm of experience none of them should have. A priest kneels beside a boy who scraped his knee on cobble, the blood a bright, private color in all this gray. The priest tears a strip from his sleeve and binds it, then marks the child's forehead with his thumb. Not a blessing, just recognition. The boy nods solemnly and disappears into the noise. Overhead, sunlight fractures in broken window panes. Each shard catches a different part of the day. One shows the past, one the next 5 minutes, one nothing at all. Enemy distance. At the intersection by the tram line, you glimpse them, German helmets glinting like insects in far sunlight. They move deliberately, armor that believes in itself. Machine guns are set up with the care of altars. Between you and them lies a single street that has changed its mind about what it is. It used to be commerce. Now it's argument. The first exchange begins, not words, but metal syllables. You press yourself against the barricade and taste stone dust. The sound doesn't travel. It arrives all at once, as if the air itself chooses sides. Your ears ring until the ringing becomes the only steady thing in the world. Someone yells, "Reload," and it's a prayer. Someone else laughs, short and unbelieving, and it's a hymn. Above the racket, pigeons burst upward, white confetti in a dark parade. The Germans fall back a little. You don't chase. The city exhales one measured breath. bread and bullets. By afternoon, the air is starch and cordite. Women bake in cellars lit by candle stubs, the dough rising slower than fear. A boy, face never shown, only his thin arms, passes loaves through a gap in the barricade. One loaf disappears toward the fighters, another to the wounded house next door. There is an understanding. If you have yeast, you share. If you have bullets, you share. If you have neither, you carry news. A courier arrives with a note folded small as a fingernail. The message, "Hold until night." You smile without humor. There is no other choice. When darkness comes, it does not fall. It seeps. Lanterns bloom again, yellow lungs in smoky throats. The barricades settle into their new role, not obstacles but geography. They are the city now. You run your hand across splintered wood, and it's warm from the day's sun, from the work, from the pulse that has migrated into things. You whisper to yourself, not for courage, but to keep the voice alive. The street will remember me. And for a moment, it does. Chapter 3. Old Town, New Grammar. Stone that learns names. The old town still smells faintly of baked bread and old paint, though most ovens are cold. You walk through its narrow veins where every wall has overheard something worth dying for. Cobblestones, rounded, patient, become punctuation marks between stories. Someone chalks words on a corner. Jesks Polska Renais Janila. The chalk breaks midway. The meaning doesn't. A sculptor drags his chisels into the street. For barricades, he mutters, but his fingers trace each tool as though apologizing. His apprentice carries a block of limestone like a child. They build their defense from art and debris alike. The bells of St. John's Cathedral ring once. The note lingers, trembling against gunfire, deciding which will last longer. Voices under the roofs. Roofs here are close enough to shake hands. You climb an attic ladder into air that smells of tar and linen. Men and women crawl from roof to roof with buckets, rifles, and messages sewn into hems. Below them, the streets burn in controlled paragraphs, each sentence a burst, each pause a reload. From this height you see how the city breathes. Fires inhale, prayers exhale, signals flash in mirrors, reflections of sun briefly tamed into language. Someone knocks 3 times from below. You answer twice. The rhythm means, alive. A girl in a nurse's band bends over a skylight, dropping a note to a courtyard post. Her braid catches a spark. She pats it out and keeps moving. You marvel at the ordinary gesture, the continuation of small tasks amid collapse. That's courage, doing laundry in a falling world. German lines tighten. At dusk, the Luftwaffe returns. Engines drape the sky in a cloth of iron. The sound flattens everything, thoughts, hope, even grammar. You dive into a stairwell as bombs cut diagonal arguments through the air. Each blast is an unanswerable question. Each echo, a comma where a life should continue. When dust clears, the statue of Serenka, the mermaid guardian of Warsaw, lies in fragments. Her sword arm gone, her face serene. You brush ash from her cheek. Your fingers leave lighter streaks like unfinished sentences. The Germans advance building by building, but the maze confuses them. They call it chaos. The city calls it syntax. The language of smoke. Night writes its own script. In basements, people whisper updates through walls like passing notes in class. Names move faster than bodies. Some streets are already myths by the time you reach them. Smoke curls through cracks, tracing invisible letters. It smells of paper, pine, and the unclaimed future. Someone coughs and apologizes for the noise. Someone else murmurs the Lord's Prayer, skipping lines, inserting names instead of saints. Outside, moonlight bends around drifting ash. It's beautiful, if you forget what it means. You stand there longer than you should, letting the sight etch itself into memory's negatives. The city is inventing a new language, half prayer, half code. Its alphabet is composed of barricades and lanterns, footsteps and silences. You realize you're fluent now. You wish you weren't. When dawn edges over the rooftops, the air tastes of lime, dust, and courage. You think of the Serenka again, her broken face calm in ruin, and whisper a promise that isn't quite words. The promise stays. The air listens. Chapter 4. The Siege of Walla is almost equal to 1,600 to 1,800 words. Morning with iron in it. The morning over Walla arrives heavy, as if the sun has been asked to lift more than light. You step into a street that remembers factories, time clocks, lunch whistles. Today, all clocks are wrong. Only breath counts correctly. Metal is everywhere. Rails, barrels, grates, hinges torn from doors. A line of carts stands like a paused sentence, oxen gone, shafts leaning in the dust. The air tastes of boiler soot and singed rope. You listen, and the distance answers with engines that don't hurry. They have learned patience. You answer with patience of your own, with stacked hire, sand tugged from gardens and playgrounds, buckets forming into a quiet drumbeat. Men who used to shape steel now shape streets. The measured blows of hammers are the only metronome that makes sense. A woman ties a white scarf at her throat, slips a note inside the knot, and nods to herself. A boy passes with buckets. You mark his small steadiness without looking at his face. There is a code in all of this. The city speaks by doing. The first pressure. It begins as a change in air. Birds fold into silence. Dogs flatten themselves in corners. The sky lowers until it seems to rest on chimney pots. The German line thickens at the edge of vision, dark stitching drawing itself through the fabric of morning. Armored vehicles nose forward like cautious animals. Infantry arranges itself the way rain arranges along a roofline. You take your place behind the barricade, palm against a plank that feels like a rib. When the first rounds come, they do not come alone. They travel with their meanings. Erasure, decree, the unsigning of a city's name. The barricade answers in its own tongue. Cracked rifles, homemade arcs of flame, the choreography of duck and rise that becomes instinct in 1 hour. You count without numbers. Bursts, pauses, the way smoke curls from a window and then doesn't. A bucket brigade moves as if one creature, passing dark water that smells of tin and ash. A figure in grey steps into the open. The street corrects the mistake. You are not brave. You are busy. These are different verbs that make the same shape. Crosscut. Factory. Field post. Far window. In a machine hall with windows shot into stars, workers turn their last stock of bolts into teeth for the street, scattering them where tires will hurry to their own undoing. The floor remembers oil and songs. Today it gains a new music. Tin, glass, the scrape of resolve. In a makeshift post where a field used to grow potatoes, a nurse pours iodine into a chipped saucer and uses cotton that was meant for cradle pillows. She hums just loud enough to steady hands that need no steadier. The man on the table stares at the timber grain, following its lines to keep away from the moment. The wood offers a geography he can travel without moving. On the 5th floor of a building that has forgotten its address, a woman peers through a gap in a curtain that once had lace. She holds a rosary, not to ask but to count. Shots, whistles, running steps. She has learned the city's new arithmetic. Pressure becomes weather. By noon, the offensive feels like climate. It arrives in waves that overlap, each one carrying debris of the last. A car burns, throwing a small, steady flag of smoke into a sky that does not know how to read anymore. Your throat tastes like a nail. Every breath carries filings and the memory of nettle tea. You drink from a canteen, and the water is warm, metallic. It still saves you. The barricade is a living creature now. Hands replace boards that splinter. Buckets chase sparks. A prayer moves along the line and becomes a rhythm, then a lull, then simply breath. From an alley, a cry starts and quickly becomes silence again, a decision, not an absence. The advance presses and then falters against a geometry improvised out of wardrobes, cobbles, and stubbornness. You know it's temporary. Everything is. But temporary is still a kind of victory when you need an hour to be long enough for a messenger to arrive. Walla after image. Morning in Walla arrives with a color the sky never learned in school. Grey with an argument of red in it, thin as smoke seen through gauze. The streets are strangely polite. They step aside for you, let you pass, then close again as if ashamed of what they showed. You move through the absence of sound that follows an orchestra's last note. No wreckage speaks, not yet. Dust hasn't remembered how to fall. A row of shoes waits neatly by a doorway whose walls forgot to stay upright. Someone's handprint darkens a beam, smaller than yours, older than dawn. A kettle stands where a stove used to be, spout lifted like a question that won't be answered this shift. In a workshop, blueprints lie open under glass that has melted itself into transparency. Lines for staircases, cupolas, balconies. Plans for beauty drawn in pencil softer than bone. You trace one curve, and the graphite comes away on your fingertip like soot. The city's last architecture lesson. Nothing straight stays straight for long, but curves remember. You cross the yard and feel eyes that aren't there. Shutters hang like half-closed lids. A bicycle leans against a wall that refuses to forget the weight of it. The air is full of metal's old perfume. Filings, bolts, rails, all cooling from yesterday's fever. At the corner, a dog stands beside a cap on the ground. You say hello without moving your lips. It watches you until the wind changes direction, then walks away carefully, as if the street might wake if stepped on too hard. You keep walking. The smoke thickens, then thins, and behind it the city begins to speak again, very softly, in a language built entirely out of memory. Interlude. City Ledger. The city keeps a ledger no office could file. Not victories, not losses, only the things exchanged to make one more hour possible. Page 1. Nails. Bent straight again, used twice. Page 2. Buckets, some with names scratched underneath like signatures. Page 3. Chairs disassembled for warmth, their screws pocketed for after. Someone writes by candlelight, pen made from the barrel of a cartridge. Ink the color of smoke. Columns neat as ribs. Under assets, the accountant lists. One matchbox with 2 matches. 13 words that still mean something. Faith, scuffed but functional. Liabilities. Time. Silence that has begun to echo. A margin note in smaller hand. Lantern, repaired with wire. Light steady enough. Farther down, a child's, small, drawing of a loaf. Next to it, a figure 8 of graphite smudge where someone tested the pencil. Every mark accounted for. Wind slips through a window broken too neatly to be accident. The page flutters once, twice. Someone presses it flat again, not wanting even air to rearrange the math. Outside, rain begins its own arithmetic on the tin roof. Ones, zeros, code for continue. When the candle gutters, the clerk closes the book, lays a hand on its cover, and in that gesture balances the column no number could hold. The weight of what it costs to stay human. The flame steadies. The ledger adds one more entry. Light. Maintained. Then the page turns itself to rest. The long red edge of day. Evening drags a bruise across the western sky. The engines loosen their grip, and for a moment the city hears itself. Somewhere, a harmonica tests 3 notes, stops, and keeps the last note alive in memory. The courtyard finds its jobs. Someone slices bread with a bayonet. Someone else boils a pot of water only to watch it steam into nothing. The watching is what matters. A photograph is passed hand to hand, then put away. You realize that looking at it makes the past heavy and useful, like a blanket pulled to the chin. A lantern is hung on a nail driven into a door set sideways. The light is small and decisive. Above it, the night clears its throat. At the edge of Walla, a factory whistle, long stilled, rises once in the wind. A phantom sound. You let it pass through you. The day ends on a quiet image, a single nail head shining in lamplight, holding. Chapter 5. Messages Through Fire. Paper that refuses to burn. Dawn is thin as onion skin. You unfold a leaflet printed in a basement that smells of ink and potatoes. The letters are slightly blurred where the roller hesitated. They still carry their meaning like water carries light. You tuck the paper against your chest, feeling its cool insistence on being read by someone else soon. The press runs on courage and hand-cranked rhythm. Pages come off damp, curled like sleeping leaves. A woman stacks them with the expertise of a librarian and the speed of a midwife. In the corner, a child's drawing faces the wall, a square and a triangle and a chimney. No faces, no dates. Outside, smoke drifts across the street like handwriting. You walk through it, careful not to smudge the letters you carry. Wire, mirror, footstep. Communication is a body with many limbs now. Wire, a line spliced 3 times, threaded through cellars and stairwells to a radio that weighs as much as a promise. The operator listens with his entire posture, head cocked as if the voice comes from behind the heart. Music ghosts under the static, and then a thin instruction chisels through. He writes on the back of a label torn from a jar, ink skipping where the paper resists. Mirror, on rooftops, small circles of tin catch and flicker. A short flash for hold, a longer one for move, a hesitation that means wait, I hear engines. Sunlight becomes code. Code becomes survival. A girl shields the mirror with her hand when the bomber's shadow passes, then resumes with a calm older than the hour. Footstep. Couriers run the grammar of alleys, cutting through walls where holes have been dug, slipping from kitchen to stair to washhouse and back out at a different number than the one on the door. They carry bread, a roll of bandage, a single line folded into something that looks like nothing. You hear them before you see them. The soft scuff, the polite request to space, the apology the city makes to let them pass. The voice in the wire. You sit at the radio in a room gone dusk at noon. The set hums like a patient animal. In the metal scent, your hands learn to be instruments. Slow on the dial, quick on the notepad, steady on the will not to hope too hard. A call sign comes through, trembling, sure enough. Coordinates, then a pause, then a sentence you want to hear again simply because a human voice said it. Hold. We see you. You do not believe in rescue. Belief is different from proof. Still, the sentence lands where it needs to, between breath and breath, a plank across a gap. You transmit back, each push of the key a footstep in a house that shakes. The reply is not quick. Waiting teaches you another kind of grammar, one where silence is a part of the sentence and means with. Crosscut, the sewers, the choir, the far listener. Beneath your soles, the sewers become a second city. A guide traces the route with a gloved hand, knowing every junction by smell and the feel of damp brick. Lights are covered. Steps are counted. Notes are passed along in whispers that don't need words. 2 taps for left, 1 for right, a pause for ladder. The air tastes like copper and old rain. A sheet of plywood floats by, then a coat hanger, then a truth. Everything finds a way to travel. In a church with windows knocked to flower, a handful of voices tries a hymn. The melody limps, stumbles, then discovers its balance like a person standing after too long sitting. The hymn is not for God, though God may listen. It is for muscle memory, for breath shared in the same room, for the idea that harmony still exists as a physics problem even now. Far away, at a clandestine set across the river, a listener curves over his headphones. He hears you. He writes the words down in a careful hand because the act of writing is a shelter. He says your city's name once under his breath, and the room becomes a promise to remember. Messages that walk themselves. By afternoon, the heat pushes everything into edges. People sleep in cracks of shade, lips open, dreams dry. You keep moving because movement is a message. We are here. A chalk arrow appears on a scorched lintel, pointing toward a courtyard where medicine waits. Another points away from a street that has become a mouth. These arrows do the work of speeches. You hand off the folded note to a woman who smells of smoke and dill. She tucks it into her apron and turns without ceremony. The ceremony is the turning. At dusk, you return to the radio and find a strip of paper pinned to the table. The letters are smudged but legible. The river knows your name. No signature. No frequency. You keep the paper not because it changes your plan, but because it changes your posture. Night settles. On a rooftop, 2 mirrors blink at each other until stars take over the duty. Under the city, a file of steps moves through water toward another address, another dawn. You lie down on a floor that remembers being scrubbed for holidays. Your last waking sight is a rectangle of window where ash drifts like slow snow. In the drifting, a shape, almost a letter, almost a word. You sleep inside the sentence it nearly says. Chapter 6. Old Town Encircled. A map drawn by footsteps. By morning the old town is a bowl cupped in 2 hands, stone and fire. You walk streets that narrow into thought, then into breath, then into the distance between 2 doorways. Encirclement isn't a line on a map. It's a feeling in the ribs. Barricades have hardened into furniture of the earth. Doors lie like sleeping animals. A church facade lists slightly, its saints powdered to a veil. Smoke draws a soft pencil over edges, erasing the distinction between wall and sky. Movement has a grammar. You learn it with your feet. Left around rubble, right through a hallway that grew a hole big enough for news. Down the stairs where someone chalked a single word, Sitcho, and everyone obeys. Up into an attic where the dust remembers dancing, and where now it remembers signals. You carry water in a dented pot whose handle bites the palm. Its weight is more honest than any speech. At the corner, a woman steadies your wrist without looking. Her hand is dry as paper. The gesture is wet with everything it means. Mosaic of rooms. A schoolroom, maps rolled tight against a blackboard that lists long-gone dates, fields sown and harvested, snowfalls counted like a litany, desks turned into beds, names carved in would becoming guardians of sleep. A nurse trims gauze into petals. She makes a flower out of necessity and does not smile. A tailor's shop, the mirror cracked into a starfish of futures. Needles sip at cloth. Armbands pile like quiet flags. Someone repairs a sleeve that is no one's priority. The act is a refusal to forget shapes. A cellar bakery. The mixers dumb and silent, but the table alive with hands. Dough rises alertly, as if aware of service. Steam makes halos that crown no one and everyone. A stairwell, a bicycle turned upside down, back wheel elevated, pedals spinning under a child's. No, a small pair of hands. The chain gleams in a single line of light. No faces. Just the idea of motion rehearsed and stored for later. The sewer guide. Under the city, the air tastes of copper and old rain. A hand touches your shoulder once, not to comfort but to calibrate, and you descend. The ladder counts out the measure, 12 rungs to the shelf, 5 to the turn, 7 to the waterline. Boot soles learn the slick grammar of algae. Breath learns to stay narrow. Light is disciplined here. A covered lamp, its halo no bigger than a prayer coin. The guide moves like a sentence that never wastes a word. Tap code replaces speech. 2 taps. Left. 1 tap. Right. A knuckle brushed against brick means duck. A forearm across the chest means stop and listen for engines you can't see. Even the water speaks. A faster lick against the wall means junction ahead. A quiet stretch means silt and patience. At a bend, the guide lifts a gloved hand and points without pointing. Palm in air, fingers low, the way one would indicate a star to a child without making the sky self-conscious. Someone behind you passes forward a bundle the size of a loaf, and for a second the tunnel smells like linen and bread and whatever people name home when they're underground. The map here lives in bodies. Scars on knuckles that remember which valves bite. A bruise in the shin that knows exactly where the pipe elbows out. The shoulder that skips a brick where mortar failed last winter. Above, the city shudders and exhales. Down here, the river's cousin drags its slow syllables past your knees. 2 lefts become 1 right if the current pulls. The guide mouths it, not to teach, but to keep the rule awake. You step where he stepped, count where he counted. 3, 8, 12. And at 12 the ladder rises like a patient argument. A palm to wood. A pause long enough to hear what the upper world intends. A hatch lifts a finger width. New air arrives, tasting of soap ash and soup. You climb into another room of the city's sentence. Inked with dust, still legible. Rooms as islands. You surface into a kitchen where a pot simmers on a stove that works the way loyalty does, quietly, without applause. On the wall, a calendar page has been turned to no month at all, just a blank square waiting for handwriting. A woman salts water with the authority of someone who has learned what each grain costs. She nods once at your wet boots and makes room for them to drip. Islands always know how to welcome ships. A tailor's parlor across the hall has reinvented itself as a post office. Thread spools become pigeonholes. Messages lie curled like shells from a beach that hasn't existed for weeks. Names are folded into addresses. To the attic at number 14, to the cellar with a green door, to the left of the stove, to the right of the saint. Delivery is a person's footsteps and a promise to return if stopped. In a child's, small bedroom, a lantern turns wallpaper flowers into fossils. A doll without eyes sits upright. patient as furniture. On the sill, two potatoes endure the attention usually given to jewels. Someone has pressed a coin into the wood and left it there. Value is a story told by surfaces, not numbers. A stair landing holds a priest and a mechanic making a treaty with a broken pump. Between them, a gasket cut from a boot heel, a prayer said under breath and not asked to do more than hold steady. The pump shudders, then commits to its job. The priest laughs once, the mechanic crosses himself once. No one keeps score. Room to room, the city assembles itself like a raft. Planks of task and rope of breath. You carry a parcel through 3 doorways and feel each one learn your weight. When you pass the final threshold, the house lets you go the way water lets go of the hull. Reluctant, then relieved. Crosscut, the enemy's perimeter, the watchers on the roofs, the letter that never reaches. Beyond the square, German observation posts blink through optics. A lieutenant notes the angles with the precision of a surveyor measuring a new park. He does not know what the park will be for. He only knows triangles and arcs. The human content of the lines is a burden deferred. On rooftops, watchers lie belly down, cupping mirrors whose light has learned to whisper. The city talks to itself along the ridges. A flash, a pause, a flash that lasts. Someone coughs into a sleeve and apologizes to no one. In the pocket of a coat folded beneath a head, a letter begins. My dearest. The ink dots where a tear fell, then dried. The letter will never leave the city. The words still do. Fire learns the streets. Artillery teaches a coarse lesson. It recites coordinates until buildings answer with dust. An impact finds St. John's again, and the nave inhales. Pews tilt as if surprised. A statue shivers itself into the alcove's arms. Candles collapse into small suns sweating. You move because moving is what the city does when the sky speaks like this. Through a wall hole, across a landing, past a door with the number fallen off. Your shoulder brushes a child's chalk drawing of a house. No faces, just a door too big, a roof too sure. It steadies you more than any saint. In a courtyard, someone's laundry, 3 shirts, 2 rags, ignites without ceremony. Flame climbs cloth like a ladder and vanishes into the absence where a roof was. You gather buckets into a chain, pass them with the tenderness of hospital work, and return to breath that scratches the throat. The hour with no edges. Toward evening encirclement deepens into condition. You measure distance not in meters, but in sips of air between shocks. A harmonica tries a scale, stops at the minor third, and stays there. Soup grows thin and important. A man produces a chess set with 3 pawns missing. He replaces them with stones. Each move is a vote for a next move. On a threshold, a woman rubs ash from a saint's brass foot until it glows like a coin from the pocket of another century. She nods once, satisfied, and covers it again with cloth. Not hope. Duty to memory. Night gathers. The old town is a lantern placed on the floor of a room with no walls. You lie down in a corridor where plaster sifts onto hair. Your last sight is a slice of sky written over by drifting embers. Punctuation without a sentence. You sleep between the marks. Chapter 7. The River That Wouldn't Answer. Water with a memory problem. You reach the Vistula the way a thought reaches a name and can't quite take hold. The river moves with the same motions it used before history thickened. Light rings on its surface, gentle as the lids of a resting eye. Boats bump wood to wood in slow conversation. From this bank, You can see roofs like torn pages and the long breath of smoke describing each pause. From the other bank, someone can likely see you. You imagine their vantage, a strip of sky, the thread of a bridge, your city's silhouette copying itself in water and getting the details almost right. The current says, "Carry." You ask, "Whom?" Wires, whispers, and weather. A radio set in a room that smells of damp rope and river grass ticks to itself. You listen for messages that have learned to walk on water. Signals swim poorly. Static has teeth. A sentence comes broken into fishbones of consonant and wish. Hold. You have become so good at hearing that word you almost don't hear it. On the embankment, mirrors blink toward a far place that blinks back slowly. Sun finds tin, tin finds eyes. Between blinks the river continues its work, indifferent to grammar. Wind off water carries a change of temperature that feels like a thought 1 degree truer than the one before. Clouds build uphill and then fold themselves away. Waiting becomes a craft practiced by the wrist and jaw. Crosscut, a far observer, a bridge, a bargain. Across the river, a watcher notes the coordinates of smoke with a pen that scratches like a soft argument. He drinks tea and lets the cup warm the knuckles that remember winter. On his paper, lines are straight. In his ear, the city is a throat that never clears. He writes the name Warsaw slower than necessary. It seems important to keep the letters company. At the bridge, iron rehearses its obstinacy. Span and truss speak in the old language of force. Underneath, drift collects. Boards, a coil of rope, a child's. No, a small boot, a branch. Your eyes follow the branch until it becomes water. A man at your side offers a bargain to the river without words. Our signal, your current, a ferry that is not a boat. The water replies by doing what water does. Sometimes that is an answer. River Night, Cherniaco attempt, is only 400 words. Night flattens the city into breath and reflection. At Cherniaco, the river gleams like an unrolled strip of film, each ripple holding a frame of what's left to cross. Boats wait under the bridge arches, ribs visible through their thin skins. Men tighten ropes that know the current better than any map. A woman hands out pieces of chalk, one mark on each or to find direction by feel. Engines sleep. Whispers take their place. Orders are given in gestures. Palm down means wait. Fist means pray later. Someone draws a cross in soot on the hull and blows it away. Because superstition is just physics in softer clothes. You wade to the gunwale. Feel the chill climb your knees. The water's grip is polite, professional. Oars dip once, twice. The current nods. Halfway across, a flare blooms upstream. A flower opened too fast, all petals and warning. Searchlights sweep. The river's back becomes a page erased and rewritten in white. You press low. The craft hums with held breath. Bullets find the water and hiss. But the sound is more steam than terror. As if the river were telling you, "I'm busy, come back later." When darkness reclaims its rights. The far bank stands waiting. Mud polite beneath boot soles. Hands lift, pull, fold, no words. Someone murmurs a name that's not their own, as if lending it for luck. Behind you, the Vistula smooths her dress, pretends she saw nothing. Above, stars resume their quiet accounting. You rest a palm on the wet hull. Thank it like a friend who won't understand the language but deserves to hear it. The next current takes the boat downstream. Empty now, shining a little. It will carry the shape of courage until morning. then forget, exactly as rivers must. The attempt. Night takes the edges off sound. Under a sky that has found stars despite smoke, a small group carries a length of timber as if it were a sentence requiring 4 hands to finish. Down to the landing, into the soft slap of water against stone. A craft that barely deserves the name receives bodies one by careful one. No faces, only shoulders, knees, the transfer of weight. You stand with a coil of rope, the strand rough as old questions. When the boat pushes off, the river accepts it with professional courtesy. A current flicks the bow, the oars answer in a minor key. Halfway out, a searchlight finds a reason to swing. It drags a pale finger across the surface, misses, and swings back. The oars feather. Someone holds a breath for too long. The night takes it and keeps it. On the far bank, a hush the size of a continent. On this bank, a whisper that is only the word go diced into syllables by teeth. The boat kisses the dark like a seal set on wax. Hands reach, lift, fold. The river rolls its shoulder and pretends not to have helped. The long refusal. Days repeat their river lesson. You go to the water's lip and listen to the same sentence told with small variations. Sometimes there is a rumor of fairies that are not fairies. Sometimes there is a rumor of guns that are not ready. Always there is the sound of water being perfectly itself. You begin to speak to the Vistula under your breath. Not prayers, not curses. Observations, as if to teach the river what it already knows. Today the light is copper. Today the smoke goes flat at midday. Today the city says its own name in a voice I recognize. At dusk, a heron lifts. One leg, then the other. You realize you have been watching its patience as if it were advice. You walk back from the bank through streets that have learned to hold their own echo. The barricades exhale when you pass, recognizing your weight. In a doorway, someone pours a measure of vodka from a bottle that has looked empty for days and wasn't. You touch the glass to your lip and set it down for the next hand. The ritual means nothing. The ritual means everything. Night again. The river goes on writing its long refusal. You sleep knowing that water keeps time differently, not against a clock, but against the stones it touches and wears down into listening. Chapter 8. Starvation Arithmetic. Hospital breath. Morning arrives like thin broth. You step into a school-turned-hospital where chalk dust and iodine have learned to rhyme. Beds are desks. Desks are islands. Sheets are flags that never wave. A woman counts pulses with 2 fingers and a memory of music. Numbers change their loyalties here. They stop meaning answers and begin meaning intervals, between one breath and the next, between morphine and none, between a name murmured and silence closing the door. You carry a bucket the color of tin. It rings once as it touches the floor. A nurse carves gauze into strips, petals for a flower that can only be imagined. On the wall, a timetable of lessons still shows arithmetic, 9 o'clock. Arithmetic continues, but the problems have become different. How many bandages per bottle of iodine? How many sips per canteen? How many minutes can a life purchase with 1 spoon of sugar? There is a boy, no face, just a collarbone like a fragile bridge, a sleeve tied off, a whisper of air leaving him like a bird startled from reeds. You steady the enamel mug. You say the names of colors softly, white, red, gray. He rests. The room does too. Clinic triage math. On the slate, someone has written arithmetic 9 o'clock. The lesson continues, but the numbers answer to different laws. Rule 1. Breath buys time. Count to 4 in, 4 out. Hold the space between as if it were a cup you could pass along. If breath is ragged, make the room gentler. Loosen a scarf, fold a jacket, turn the lantern so it warms without blinding. Don't promise sleep. Offer now. Rule 2. Warmth is medicine. A cup in a hand changes the hand changes the face changes the room. Measure heat in spoons. 1 spoon of tea equals 10 steady heartbeats. 1 spoon of soup equals a decision postponed for an hour. 1 spoon of sugar equals a story someone is strong enough to tell. Rule 3. Pain is a map. Follow it with 2 fingers. Read its border out loud so it knows it has been seen. Mark the crossing points with linen. Do not worship it. Do not deny it. Treat it like weather that can be prepared for, not fate that must be obeyed. The nurse hums scales, so quiet the air has to lean in to listen. She chooses the minor key because it behaves. On the wall, a tally grows. Morphine/iodine/clean cloth/names. The chalk breaks. She writes with its blunt end and the line grows thicker. Not elegant, but readable from the corridor by someone who needs to know whether hope is to the left or the right today. At the window, ash drifts like disobedient snow. A boy, no face shown, lifts a cup and drinks without spilling. A hand steadies the cup, then the hand is steadied by another hand, and so on, until the whole room holds itself level on an ocean the color of tin. Arithmetic proves what the heart suspected. Small numbers, added carefully, balance the page. When the lamps are trimmed, the room dims to the brightness of a remembered birthday. You check the slate again and add a final column no teacher taught you to write. Mercy, carried forward. Bread lines and ledgers. Outside, a line grows along a wall that still remembers posters. Bread is an event measured in shadows. How far your shadow travels while you wait, how much smaller it gets by noon, how it disappears when a cloud covers the sun and the world briefly forgets you. A woman with flour on her forearms ladles soup with the calm of a judge. The pot steams like a small miracle that refuses to learn new tricks. A ledger sits open on a crate. Names. Tallies. A simple mercy of columns. You see your own name spelled correctly, and it feels like a hand on your shoulder from a life before forms. Someone divides a loaf along lines cut with a piece of wire. Each slice is a vote for tomorrow, carried carefully in a pocket where a photograph used to live. Someone else hands you a spoonful of jam saved for children. No faces. A small hand takes the spoon and vanishes down the stair, the sweetness a rumor you choose to believe. Crosscut. Pharmacist. Pastor. Cellar choir. In a storeroom that once displayed perfumes, a pharmacist weighs powder on a scale that trembles. He scribbles labels in a hand that wants to be elegant and cannot afford it. Bottles become sentences. He finishes them with corks. People will read them with their mouths. A pastor sits on a step in a stairwell, jacket folded under him like a final good suit. He says nothing. People sit beside him and say nothing too. Later, they call it prayer. In the moment, it is companionship the size of a step. Under a collapsed bakery, a choir forms from 5 voices and a need for thirds. No words, not tonight. Only syllables held until they grow warm and shareable. A flame shivers in a niche and does not go out. The cost of heat. Evening makes decisions about light. Someone breaks a chair calmly, apologizing to the memory of its legs. A stove inhales. A kettle answers. You think about wood as currency and flame as a bank that doesn't keep receipts. You know exactly how many minutes a handful of coal will buy, how many pages of a newspaper must be twisted to become a rope of fire. In another room, a woman tears an old dress into kindling. The sound of fabric ripping is surprisingly gentle. She folds the buttons into her pocket. Keepsakes of structure. Upstairs, a window has forgotten its glass and remembers being a hole for light to pass. You sit there and count smoke columns as if they were church towers you used to name on Sundays. They rise. They waver. They learn the wind and report back. The ledger of breath. By night, the hospital sleeps like a ship in bad weather. Nurses walk with the balance of sailors who know which boards complain. A list grows on a scrap. Morphine, none. Bandage, scarce. Bread, tomorrow. Names, blessed. You add your own task. Carry water, carry news, carry the weight of the cup to a lip. Carry yourself back to a corner where sleep has been arranged as a favor. You lie down. The corridor is cold, specific. Your last image is a spoon resting on a folded map, both shining in the same small way. The arithmetic holds you. Not fear, not hope, just the next sum and the next. You close your eyes inside a quiet proof. Chapter 9. The Last Streets. Diminishing. Dawn doesn't arrive so much as admit it has nowhere else to go. The city is down to essential sentences. Barricades speak softly. Roofs make no promises. You walk streets that have become thinner than their names. A flag still hangs at one corner, more memory than cloth. Someone raises a cup of water to it and drinks in the flag's direction. Ritual is a final grammar you refuse to forget. The Germans advance by paragraphs. Buildings withdraw by lines. Between them, people move by syllables. Door, step, breath. Terms. In a cellar bright with candle smoke, the word circulates. Capitulation. It feels like a stone passed from palm to palm, warm from the last hand, heavy in the next. Leaders meet at a table that used to know chess. Maps are flattened and held down by cups. Pencils travel their borders like small, worried trains. You stand outside the door and learn to listen to the silence that follows sentences. That is where decisions live. The conditions are the conditions. Evacuation. Civilians first. Wounded next. Fighters later. You repeat the order like a prayer you do not like, but must memorize. Crosscut. A white cloth, a register, a key. From a window framed by soot, a white cloth appears, tentative, then sure. It is not surrender. It is an intermission of bullets long enough to count. A German officer removes his cap indoors. The room understands the courtesy and pretends it helps. At a doorway, a woman opens a ledger and writes the names of those who pass with the same care she once reserved for letters to a far cousin. She underlines certain names. She doesn't know why, only that the hand asked for the line. A key turns in a lock, and the sound is precise. The door does not open. The key is placed on a nail above the frame, a small promise to whoever comes later that there was once an inside and an outside and a way between them. The long walk out. The exodus is quieter than a holiday and slower than grief. You line up with others in a street that once smelled of pears and saddle soap. Bundles are small. Steps are deliberate. No children's faces, only small shapes inside coats guided by larger hands. A soldier, young enough to be a rumor of someone's son, keeps his eyes where the street directs them. You keep yours where the sky refuses to change. A cart rolls. A wheel protests. A woman lifts a corner of a blanket and checks the breathing beneath, then lowers it carefully, as if tucking in the night itself. At the square, someone counts 1, 2, 5, 10, then stops counting and begins naming. House, door, window, tree. The litany is geography enough. After quiet. By evening, the city has handed over its last occupied rooms and kept only echo. You stand where a street used to turn and listen to the turn anyway. It still makes the sound. A man kneels and brushes dust from a stone carved like a leaf. He pockets the leaf. You take nothing. You have taken the shape of these weeks into your bones, and they will not loosen their grip. Night comes without preface. You lie down under a sky that refuses to be anything other than sky. In the distance, the river practices its soft refusal, its patient syllables. You do not hate it. You understand what it means to continue. On the last street, a lantern swings and settles. The flame leans toward the glass and remembers the first match. You breathe. You are counted. The city sleeps the sleep that comes after being awake too long. Somewhere, a clock discovers its hour again and decides to keep it. The last image is simple. A door key on a nail above an empty frame, catching a thread of starlight. A promise noticed by no one and kept anyway. Epilogue. What the river kept. Morning in Warsaw arrives with the modest certainty of a shopkeeper turning a key. Not the old key on a nail above an empty frame, but a modern key, brass and busy, slipping home with practiced ease. Trams hum their measured sentences. Windows collect the day without negotiation. You cross a street that once forgot its own name and find the letters returned, repainted, steady. The city wears its scars the way a tree wears weather, rings you can read if you pause and touch. Some bricks lean a fraction toward memory. Some courtyards echo a half-second longer than physics requires. A new café sets tables where a barricade once breathed. Cups meet saucers with that small porcelain kiss, and the sound is both ordinary and ceremonial. People carry loaves under their arms again, not rations but choices. You breathe and taste pastry, rain, and the faintest spice of iron that lives at the bottom of every river town's morning. Old town stones remember feet. Yours join the tally. You follow an alley that seems to drift a little, as if reluctant to commit to only one present tense. A wall bears a plaque, another bears ivy, both are forms of text. Here and there chalk clings to mortar in pale freckles, the ghost of arrows and words that once meant left, right, quiet, alive. The wind tries them on as if to see whether they still fit. Some do. At St. John's, light slides down an aisle that was rebuilt with the patience of prayer. It finds brass and sets it burning without heat. A hush sits in the nave, friendly and exact, not the hush of waiting but the hush of arrival. You stand in it and listen for what isn't there. The training of your ears has not entirely faded. Instead of engines, you hear footsteps, pages, the breath of people who no longer count pulses for permission to stay. The Syrenka stands again by the river, sword raised, face calm as before. Pigeons gossip at her feet. Tourists angle phones. A child points, no faces you hold, just the arrow of an arm, and asks a question you can't hear. The statue answers by not moving, the practiced eloquence of stone. You brush a fleck of leaf from the railing and look east, where clouds pile and separate with the tidy industry of a laundry line on a breezy day. The Vistula keeps its long refusal in a different key. She carries and carries, no longer asked to do more than that. Sun writes on her surface, wind edits. Bridges leave their shadows like signatures that have learned restraint. You think of the nights when a boat became a sentence that needed many hands to finish. You think of mirrors and signals and the way silence learned to mean with. Water passes under the span and does not remember, and yet somehow it does. Because you do, and standing here is one of the ways a river is taught to keep a story. In a museum not far away, Glass holds objects at the distance that respect requires. A cup blackened at the rim, a kettle's soft bruise of smoke, a strip of linen. A door laid sideways in a photograph becomes a line of poetry you can't stop repeating. A leaflet printed in a basement curls slightly at the edges, still committed to being read. You find your face in the reflection, and it looks like a visitor's face, and also like the shadow of someone who left a key where a stranger might find it. You wonder who that stranger became. Outside again, the air carries a start of rain taste that belongs to cities which have learned to absorb what falls. On Krakowski Przedmieście, a tram bell rings once, pure, workmanlike, sure of its place, and schoolchildren cross the street in a swarm of color that refuses to be catalogued. Their teachers speak in declarative sentences. The day obeys. From an open window, a scale spills, a piano practicing forgiveness. Nearby, a dog chooses sunlight over everything else. You stand in the stream of ordinary life until your shoulders remember their natural height. Memory changes nothing, you think, and then you adjust the thought. Memory changes the weight of things, a loaf, a cup, a word like home. It alters how the hand holds them, how the mouth speaks them, how the breath arrives and leaves. That is not nothing. You walk to a courtyard you have not seen before and yet recognize. The shape of it, the way the sky perches on its rim like a bird considering. Laundry climbs a line and descends as shirts and sheets and a red dress that knows its brightness. For a moment you see, double exposed, the wardrobe dragged across cobbles, the lantern learning its job. Then the present returns because someone opens a window and waters a plant that survived a move, and the water's fall is generous, precise, enough. There is a key above a door here, too, an ornament only, welded in place, polished by weather into a sign. You smile at the exactness of the choice. Not a relic, not a claim, just a gentle notation in the margin. Someone once promised passage. Passage was kept. Evening slides in the way it always meant to. Blue layered over gold, shadows with soft edges, the instinct for lamps. In cafes and kitchens, cups meet tables, cutlery ticks, small laughter finds its pitch. On the bridges, people pause without knowing why, the way people do in every city with a river and a past. You join them and watch light move from water to face to air, an old relay, endlessly rehearsed, never finished. The lesson is quiet and not new. Endurance is a choreography of small tasks and the refusal to make a god of noise. A city is not its victories or defeats alone. It is the inventory of hands and the lungs that outlast orders. Some match always finds a way to be struck. Some lantern always learns how to hold its circle. Some barricade breathes long enough to remember how breathing works. Metal cools. Bread rises again. Names are spoken in the right order, not as summons or roll call, but as greetings. Night settles. You listen for the old grammar, the stutter of engines, the scraped bowl of sky, and hear instead a different language. Tires on wet stone, sandal slap, a bicycle's friendly click. The city speaks it fluently now, with an accent shaped by everything it survived. You stand a little longer, then turn toward the tram, the key, the cup you will lift and set down. The tram sighs before it moves, a sound equal parts electricity and memory. You step aboard with others, students wrapped in headphones, an old man counting coins by touch, a woman in a red scarf staring at a paperback whose corners are soft with use. Doors fold in with a click that feels like punctuation, not closure. The city glides past in layers of reflection. Shop fronts, rain streaks, your own face, the ghost of another. Neon signs perform for the fog. Somewhere above them, pigeons rehearse the same sentence they've said since chimneys were first rebuilt. The air inside smells faintly of metal and bread, iron rails meeting bakeries, yesterday meeting today. You hold the handrail, its brass worn smooth by generations who've steadied themselves in motion. Each stop chimes with the gentleness of an apology, for the delay, for the noise, for the fact that history has no breaks, only pauses. Outside, a child, no face shown, presses a handprint of steam onto the window and traces it into the outline of a key. The tram bell rings once, clean and exact, and you remember the other key, the one left hanging above an empty frame. When the tram slows for your stop, the city's reflection shifts again. For a moment, the window shows not buildings but the texture of time itself. Brick, glass, breath, and the quiet handwriting of light. You step down onto wet cobblestones that shine like open pages. Behind you, the tram door closes with the same small sound as a promise kept. In that sound, every key still turns. Every door still remembers what it means to open. And the city keeps breathing, one stop, one match, one word at a time. Aftermath, the city that refused to disappear. Morning arrives without permission. It creeps between the bricks, quiet and grey, touching what's left of windows, bones, and dreams. The smoke that once climbed like a flag now lies flat across the rooftops, too tired to rise. And beneath it, Warsaw breathes again, shallowly but still. The uprising has ended. The guns have gone silent, but not from peace. The streets are a geography of loss, staircases leading nowhere, walls that remember voices. In the shell of a building, a kettle sits blackened on its stove, handle warped into a question mark. Outside, a tram lies on its side, its rails vanishing under ash. A city that once measured time in the sound of its bells now counts only echoes. You walk through what remains. Every step feels like trespass. The air tastes of lime and soot, the sweet metallic ghost of fire. What was once the old town has become a landscape of paper and shadow. Somewhere, a piano key clinks under falling plaster, one stubborn note that refuses to die. They said the city would be erased, and perhaps it nearly was. But cities, like people, are not made of stone alone. They are made of memory, and memory burns slower than buildings. Even as the flames took roofs and walls, they could not take the stubborn grammar of belonging. People still whispered the names of their streets, even when the streets were gone. They still folded bread into handkerchiefs, still lit candles against the dark, still believed that if the heart beats once more, the world must follow. You stop beside a broken statue, a child cast in bronze, one arm missing, eyes turned toward something invisible. The inscription is charred, unreadable. It doesn't matter. You know what it says. It says, "We were here." History will write that Warsaw fell. But that is not the truth. Warsaw endured, stubborn and luminous in its ruin, reminding the world that courage is not measured by survival but by defiance. The men and women who fought here did not expect victory, only the dignity of resistance. They became the city's last architecture, living walls of will, holding up what stone could not. Years later, when the rubble was cleared, people began again, brick by scavenged brick, prayer by whispered prayer. Children played in streets that had no names yet. Elders sat on doorsteps that led only to sky. And out of the silence, a rhythm returned. Hammers, footsteps, laughter. The sound of a city teaching itself to live again. You can still see it today, if you know where to look. In a wall that leans a little to one side but stands anyway. In a patch of cobblestone kept unpaved, as if the past must always have a window. In the faint trace of an armband's red painted on a memorial, faded but not gone. And in that persistence lies something holy. Because Warsaw was not rebuilt for tourists or monuments. It was rebuilt for the simple, stubborn reason that people need to go on, to wake, to work, to plant flowers in the shadow of catastrophe. It was rebuilt so that those who had died could return in spirit and find their city still standing, even if only in outline. You stand at the river now. The Vistula moves slowly, carrying with it fragments, a tile, a button, a piece of mirror that once reflected someone's face. The water folds them into itself, as if keeping the city's memory safe beneath its skin. And when the light shifts, you see it, Warsaw reflected upside down, trembling but whole. The match that once burned across the courtyard is long gone. But its glow remains, somewhere deep in the air, the faint ember of refusal, the memory of a people who decided that dying on their feet was better than kneeling in the dark. That ember has no nationality, no century. It belongs to anyone who has ever said no when the world demanded silence. You turn to leave, and for a moment the city seems to breathe beside you, not as it was, not as it will be, but as it endures, wounded, unyielding, alive. Before you go, if quiet corridors of history belong in your evenings, you might keep walking with us, gently, at the speed of breath. Tell us, maybe, where you're listening from, or which image lingers. The key above the door, the lantern's patient circle, the river refusing and refusing until refusal became a kind of carrying. Let the noise of today fold itself away. The match, the lantern, the barricades' slow lung, the river. All of them keep watch. All of them go on. You're listening to echoes of war.